global agricultural trade. The future looks a heck of a lot different than the past. That's what we're covering with Joe Vaclavik in this episode of The Business of Agriculture. Are you looking for productive efficiencies in growing higher yielding, better performing crops? New Fields Ag provides a complete portfolio of biological products focused on you, the farmer. Visit newfieldsag.com for more information to help you farm better. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of The Business of Agriculture. I got a fantastic one for you today because I have one of the best guests I've ever had. That's right, 420 plus episodes of this show have aired, and I've had some really good guests. You know, the economists from Rabobank, commodity people, trade organizations, executive directors. We get some pretty darn good stuff, and we take a lot of different looks at things. You know, you tune into this show because I am not afraid to go out here and tell you stuff that you do not hear from the Farm Bureau. Oh, you know, just plant fence row to fence row. You feed the world, feed the world. You know what? Everybody's going to starve. Thank a farmer. You know you don't get that here. You get straight talk. Well, I've got the straightest talking dudes, the straightest talking dude you're ever going to talk to. He's the pride of the Illini. Okay, I might have made that up. But I think if you go with University of Illinois graduates from the ag school, there's Vaclavik, and then like 7 notches under him, Matt Bennett. That's the only 2 that I can talk to you about right now. But anyway, his name is Joe Vaclavik. He has a fantastic following for, if you don't check him out, Grain Markets and Other Stuff is the name of his podcast. It's a daily show on YouTube, and you really need to check it out. And I said, all right, you know what? You and I both kind of agree that the future is going to look a lot different than the past. We have a business model that's very much become entrenched in the last 20 years. Grow more stuff in the ag belt, figure out a way to put it on a ship and take it over to China. Well, that business model is not sustainable. In fact, it's arguably broken. And everybody thinks it's about tariffs. I think it's about Trump. And God knows Mr. Vaclavik has gotten so much flack. Should start calling the guy Flackovic because he's getting so much flack from these people that just log onto his show and type hateful statements, political statements. His show's not even political, but the point is, what we're talking about right now, Joe, is not because of a tariff or a trade. The reality is we are oversupplied, and the business model of just making a bunch of stuff, putting on a ship, I think that is, we saw it, and that ship has sailed. It might even be sinking.
Thank you for the intro. First off, I was like a C student in college at best, so I don't know if I'm the pride of anything. I'm more of an on-the-job learner, you know.
When I go to Champaign, I took a picture and I sent it to you, and I even put it on social media. I said, "I'm in the land of Joe Vaclavik and Matt Bennett."
Yeah. No, I spent some time there. I remember some of it, but yeah, it was a lot of fun.
You know what? I'm going to get interviewed by a friend of mine's daughter who's in the School of Agriculture at Purdue, and her assignment was to find someone that's a Purdue agricultural alumni who is successful and interview them about what they're doing now. So maybe you and I was certainly not the A+ student either.
I don't know that like being a public person like I am kind of now means that you're successful necessarily. There are plenty of people who are successful that are not public people, but if you want to go with that, that's fine.
Well, maybe you also are doing something of your own volition that you created, and that's cool. And also, you're informing a lot of people about this industry, and that's kind of what I do also. So I'd say
maybe so.
Success there.
Maybe so.
All right. There's a lot of people that are in this industry that almost are the definition of insanity. Keep doing the same thing the same way and expecting a different result. Production agriculture, we keep wanting to produce more stuff, and then I keep hearing this thing, and I tune into rural radio. I was like, well, we can just create more demand. And I'm like, I don't know what you folks don't get. We're oversupplied generally on everything except for beef, and the future looks a whole hell of a lot different than the past 20 years. And I figured this wouldn't rattle cages, but it gets people very worked up because they want to place blame because they don't want to change. Am I reading this right?
Depends on who you're talking to. I think that a lot of farmers understand what has led us to the situation that we're involved in right now. So we're in what I have argued is probably like the 3rd year of a farm economy recession. It's the result of a number of things. The biggest thing is input inflation, in my opinion. We saw a huge jump in the price of the production cost of corn, soybeans, wheat, whatever, 2021, 2022, in that time frame. We saw this big jump, and it's very, very difficult to be profitable when you're in a big crop, high input inflation price environment. And that's where we're at right now. So you've got the input costs, I think, are what started it. And then you had weather, which was generally good. And commodity prices, the prices of corn, soybeans, wheat, generally speaking, are weather derivatives more so than anything, more so than any policy that comes out of the White House, more so than anything you read on the news. It's their weather derivatives. And we've just gone a couple of years now without a weather problem in the United States, without a weather problem in Brazil. And it's kind of the perfect storm of bad things. You've got commodity prices that are closer to multi-year lows than multi-year highs, and input costs that are as high as they've ever been.
Yeah. So I had an economist on talking about the input costs up. It's easy to say, okay, well, everything at the grocery store is up 40 or 50%. Some of these things are up 100% over the last several years, right? Forms of nitrogen, forms of fertility, et cetera, et cetera. There's the argument that we hear, and you and I both would agree to a certain extent, these providers of inputs are not motivated to bring down their costs to the producer, a farmer, because if there's money that's going to flow from the United States Department of Agriculture or through government programs to the farm belt, then it's essentially, to me, it reminds me of the student loan situation. Why would our two alma maters want to reduce costs when essentially the student is backstopped by a federal student loan program that's $1.7 trillion of debt or some ungodly number like that? Why would you ever be incentivized to reduce cost when you figure the payer is backstopped? And that's almost where you could say the farmer is. The farmer is almost like the college student on a student loan right now, where there's a backstopping and it perpetuates the inflationary environment.
Yep, totally agree. The farmer is a mechanism by which the direct payments flow back to the input suppliers, essentially. And the direct payments, I mean, they keep farmers in business. It's a Band-Aid. They'll keep you in business for a year, but it's not a long-term solution because it results in input inflation. And that's what I led off with. I said that's the biggest problem is input inflation. So when the government's, writing $10 billion worth of checks on an annual basis, it's going to keep the inputs high despite the fact that there's no farmer profitability, which is not really the way that a market should work, but that's the way that it works.
Yeah, it's the way it does work. And so there's very little. We're recording this November of 2025. Depending on when you're listening to this, maybe the scenario is very different by the time you're hearing or watching this. Neither Joe nor I believe that
input costs don't come down. They go up. They don't come down. Now, commodity prices can do whatever they want. They can go up, but input prices, I mean, to say like there's going to be a 20 or 30% decline in the cost to grow an acre of corn at any point it's not reasonable, or it ain't going to happen.
That's right. So there's you and I both agree there's probably not much incentive to bring down input prices, and that could be everything from machinery to seed to chemical to fertility to whatever. Fuel's a different one. That does move, but the others really do not. And neither you nor I think that they will face downward pressure only if somehow the farmer can get by without them, and that's not really very likely.
Yeah. The only way I think that they come down in a material fashion, like fertilizers being impacted by tariffs a little bit, you could see some relief there. But generally speaking, I mean, this is not a popular or fun thing to say, but if you really wanted to see input prices come down, you would need to see the farm economy reset, and you would need to see some failures, and you need to see reduced demand. And the government, whether you like it or not, I don't have an opinion on it. It doesn't matter what I think, but the government is not going to let that happen. So you've got this market this market or industry of farming that's not really acting like a fair market or even market industry. It's acting like an industry that requires government support.
Dead on, and a lot of folks don't like to hear that, but if 20% of the dry cleaners went out of business because men stopped wearing suits, which largely they have, there was no federal intervention that said, oh my God, 20%, 1/5 of our dry cleaners are going out of business this next 2 years. We've got to step in and prop them up. If you saw, we haven't even seen 1% of farms going through bankruptcy. We've seen a fraction of
very
1%.
Tiny.
A small fraction of 1%, and we're already hearing that we have to intervene. So people in ag don't like to hear it, Joe, but what you just said, this is not a true economic or a true marketplace in that regard because of the intervention.
Here's the thing. The government, I think, understand people, the general public, Americans don't understand how good they have it with regard to cheap food. Now, you said it, price at the grocery store is high as they've ever been. Yes, they are. But as a percentage of income, the amount of money that we spend on food in the United States is very tiny compared to almost the rest of the world, especially the developing or third world type countries. So we've got it. Americans, the general public, have it really good in that regard, and I don't think they understand it. I don't think they understand just how good they have it, and it's part of the puzzle. It's part of it. The government, 99% of the people that live in the United States would prefer cheap commodities and cheap food, and we're more expensive than we used to be, but we're still cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't looked at the most current numbers. Obviously, wage inflation has not kept up with food, housing, insurances, and all those types of inflation.
Some of the government numbers would say that it's started to in the last couple of years. Believe that if you want.
Right. When I did my book 5 years ago, it was like 8.9% of our income is spent on food. It was just under 10%, as I recall. Whereas like in Nigeria, it was around half. Yeah. So the average Nigerian is spending about half of their income on food, and we're spending 10%.
To use the word average it's a bad word, because especially in the post-COVID environment, we've seen what economists would call a K-shaped economy. If you're somebody who owns assets, you own farmland, you own stocks, you own gold, you own silver, you're doing actually pretty damn well because you've been able to beat inflation through your asset ownership. If you're a wage earner and you don't own assets, you don't own gold or stocks, you don't own 401k, you don't own real estate, the inflation is eating you alive. And there's a big chunk of the population that is really struggling right now, and there's a big chunk of the population that's doing as well as it has ever done. And it's the weighting is probably about as bad as it's ever been.
Yeah, and by the way, even though he's from Chicago, he's not a hardcore socialist where he's like advocating that we all have the same exact net worth. But the huge bifurcation between the strong haves and the many have-nots has become bigger spread. We have a bigger spread in distribution of wealth than we've arguably had since the late 1800s, when we had like the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and that crowd in the upper 1/10 of 1%, and then the poor people out here that were literally living in shacks and digging ditches for 12 hours a day. I want to get into that, and I want to get into where this inflation thing is, and then bring it back to global ag trade and how the future looks. Before I do that, I want to remind you about my friends over at Harvest Returns. I talk about them a lot because, you know what, if you have an agribusiness, it could be a farm, it could be a ranch, it could be a meat processing company, it could be anything in this space, you need funding, because money helps you get to where you want to go. You need infusion of capital, but sometimes what you have does not fit a bank template. You walk in the bank and are like, no, we just loan housing money, whatever. You need money. Well, Harvest Returns can help. Harvest Returns has a pool of 18,000 investors, and they create financing options that are as creative and different, as unique as your operation. Harvest Returns can bring the capital you need to reach your goals. So go to harvestreturns.com to learn more about how you can get started with growing your operation today. It's money that can help your agribusiness that maybe doesn't fit, the round peg, square peg, round hole kind of a concept. All right. On that front, commodities are one of those things that's always a safe haven, right? It's kind of like farm grant, gold, whatever. So
no, some commodities are, not all of them. I mean, clearly, look at what's going on. Gold, silver, to the moon, right? Cattle has a story. So
record
to the moon.
And almost euphorically, what our friend Alan Greenspan would have called irrationally exuberant.
So those trades, long gold, long silver, they fall under the debasement trade category. The dollar is being debased because the government continues to print money. We're $38 trillion in debt. The haves, the people who have the money, whether it's a bank, a fund, a person, they're smart enough to know that they've got to own gold, silver, stocks, Bitcoin, farmland, whatever it is. They need to own something that's going to protect them because they know that the debasement is going to continue. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately for our crowd, corn and soybeans are not part of the debasement trade. We're oversupplied. They're renewable commodities that are reproduced every year in multiple hemispheres. And that's one of the problems that we have right now.
So when we said the future looks a lot different than the past, okay, inflation does have an impact on this. First off, as you said, it has absolutely, it's made things like gold ridiculous. It has propped up the price of farmland. When people say, how is farmland still so pricey when these commodity prices are low? And to your point, it's a hedge against inflation. It's a hard asset.
Yep. Yeah, it's the same. It's gold or silver. It's under the same trade. And that's a positive for farmers because I know personally a lot of farmers are weary of investing in things like the stock market. I want things I can touch and hold and see and stand on. Okay, farmlands, Ben, you're kind of ace in the hole then.
Mm-hmm. So then there's the driver of the costs, and that's going to make it so that there's a squeeze. But our answer has always been, Joe, let's grab a new market. And I mean, from the Corn Growers Association, the American Soybean Association, name every trade group, their answer has been the same. They hire a whole bunch of employees. They have their little bureaucracies, and they say, we're out here promoting your product, and we're going to create demand. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily even possible sometimes. And they say, we're going to go open up new markets. Okay. I'm all for that. But the reality is, and I've put a bunch of videos out there, I said, there's nobody sitting around with an empty plate and a handful of money saying, I've got money, I want to buy food. I just don't, I don't have nowhere to buy it from. And I got an empty plate. If you've got money in this hand, your plate is overflowing. And I don't see that changing, with the exception of some sort of massive war. And I'm talking like catastrophic, where it distorts supply chains and makes it so that food can't get produced. Almost Armageddon. I don't see anything that would change this other than you have to have a weather event that is global, which we don't really have. A global weather event or a global shaking war turmoil. It's the only thing that's going to change the supply situation in the next 10 to 50 years.
I don't agree with all that. I agree with the war part. The war part, absolutely. You saw what people thought was going to happen when Russia invaded Ukraine, right? We went to $13, and it was all for naught. It was the wrong trade. It's not. They still ship wheat out of the Black Sea as much as they ever have. The weather thing, you don't need a global weather event to get corn back to $7. You need a U.S. weather event. I mean, we're still the biggest corn producer on the planet. Problem in China could maybe do something similar. I don't think it needs to be a global disaster. You run into something significant enough in Brazil, you'll get beans back to $15 pretty easily. That's historically how it's happened, and that's how it'll happen again. And I'm not predicting it this year, next year, the year after, but eventually you'll run into a weather problem. The thing about a commodity and what you said about marketing is interesting because by definition, a commodity, it's all the same, right? So when the National Corn Growers goes out, and I'm not bashing the groups by any means, but I mean we're gonna try to pitch our corn versus somebody else. Nobody cares. They just care about the price.
Right.
They just care about the price because it's all the same.
Pretending there's a difference in U.S. soybeans and soybeans that come from Argentina or what they ever should be. It's a commodity, and the markets have commoditized it for that very purpose, right?
Yeah, people argue there's a little bit of difference in quality between it's not enough to really move the needle in the eyes of China or whoever. So, I mean, they are these groups, and some of the government policy has helped to generate additional demand. Like we're crushing more soybeans than we ever have because of biofuel policy.
Yep. So
biofuel policy, things along those lines can absolutely help the markets. And without that biofuel policy, the soybean market would probably have an 8 in front of it and not an 11. I mean, that's the reality of it. If we were in a biofuel environment like we were, say 10 years ago. So policy can change things. We love to use some corn for sustainable aviation fuel, things along those lines. But in terms of the export market, that's a little trickier.
So I like that you disagree with me when I said nothing's really going to change it, and we both agreed that a war event, and I'm not talking about what's happening in the Middle East because that's not, but I'm talking about some major thing. Okay, you just
like
said,
a production or export disruptor, like what we thought Russia-Ukraine was going to be.
Yeah, right. Where you're taking a massive producer of agricultural goods and making it so that they can't get them to market or whatever. But the other one you said, and a lot of folks struggle with this one, that the supply is so great, but the price moves really on that 5 to 10% amount of it. In other words, the price doesn't move at all when there's this amazing amount, 16 billion bushels of corn produced in the United States of America, whatever that thing is. But if you take Iowa out because Iowa has a bunch of derechos or whatever, that's enough to change it because your number one corn producing state is 10% of the corn production, 7% of the corn production. The price has always moved on that 5% of at the top, right?
Yeah, it's like I said, it's always been, generally speaking, a weather derivative, and it still is. And this what I'm going to say is more of like a mathematical balance sheet, spreadsheet type thing. But the balance sheets in corn are not necessarily super bearish. Like you run into a significant U.S. weather problem where next year, the corn yield comes in at 165 because we have drought across the Midwest or for whatever reason, flood. I mean, you name it. The market will react to that. It doesn't take as much as you think, and it wasn't that long ago that we were at phenomenally high prices. 2022 was a year where farmers made, big bucks, big right. bucks, and that was only 3 years ago. So, we're not that far removed from good markets, and I don't know if moving forward we're that far removed either. It's going to be a function of weather.
You just talked about the reality of the propping up, or if you will, we want to back up the farm belt because it gives us food security, which is national security, et cetera, et cetera. There's almost no willingness at all, trade or no trade, whatever. There's no willingness at all in our government to allow the type of carnage we're talking about. Like I said, they're going to toss money out here, and we were only seeing a fraction of 1% of the farming operations, like 1/10 of 1%, I think is the number. They're going through some of it financial hardship, but through actual bankruptcy. Yeah. There's no stomach at all right now to let like 20% of the farms go under. I mean, and idling of land that would change this whole thing. Like, what would happen in a laissez-faire economic situation, completely hands off? You might see 1/5 of these operations just fold, and a bunch of land that doesn't even get planted next year and can't afford the inputs and all that. That won't happen.
It's a very unlikely scenario. And you asked, do you have the stomach for it? Can you handle it? Can I? If we're being frank, can you handle it? Can I handle it? I don't know.
You and I both work in this space, and you can say, well, Joe and Damian have some money socked away and all that. I don't know that I can handle it emotionally.
Nobody cares what happens to us, but just in general, you're talking some pretty serious shit here.
You're talking about I'm a little older than you. I saw the 1980s. I know that bankers got shot, and I know that farmers killed themselves, and I know that the devastation and families. Then all of a sudden, you got mom and dad are getting divorced, and it's like, what the hell happened there? Well, financial hardship creates a tremendous amount of personal hardships, and then the depression and all. I'm not talking about the depression in the 1930s. I'm talking about the human condition. So yeah, do I have a stomach for it? I'm not sure that I do either, to be honest.
Yeah, and the 80s weren't that long ago where you've got people in power who saw it and understood what it was, and I don't know that anybody's ready to see that or wants to see that again.
No, I agree with you. So when we say the future looks a lot different than the past in way of trade, I put a video out there about China. China is the business model of us just thinking that China's going to continue to demand more stuff. China has doubled its caloric consumption in the last 15 to 20 years. You got 1.4 billion people that double their caloric consumption in 2 decades. They can't double their caloric consumption again, Joe. So I think the future looks a lot more like we've got smaller customers. We've got more competition. I believe there will be more protectionism. I believe that some countries, all countries tend to protect their ag sector. Look at France as a gleaming example. I think there's going to be more protection, and there's just going to be more competition and fewer big trade deals that involve agriculture. What do you think?
And their population's declining, supposedly, right?
Sure, and so is the global population is not going to continue to expand. So the future looks a lot less. I think there's going to be more protectionist barriers and less product that gets put on a ship and goes both ways.
I'm not as worried about the protectionist barriers. Like you mentioned, what people comment on social media, and it's almost all about tariffs, and Brazil and China have this cozy relationship, and that means you guys are screwed. And maybe that's true, but it still comes down to the balance sheet, what's available globally and what's not. China's going to buy soybeans from the United States if they need them, even though they don't like us. Yeah. I did an interview with Brooke Rollins on just last week, and she came out and said, China's not a friendly trade partner. They're an adversary, basically, is what she said. And we understand that, but we also understand that, as we mentioned, a commodity is a commodity. Yeah. And if Brazil doesn't have what they need, they're going to come here. And it just so happens that Brazil's expanding at a breakneck pace. Chinese demand's still expanding, but when you say future, what are we talking? Are we talking 3 years? Are we talking 30 years? 30 years is going to look a hell of a lot different. 3 years, I don't know.
I made the prediction in my Business of Ag group that in 5 years, China wouldn't even be a customer of ours. You don't agree?
No, I could see that. Brazil continues to expand the way that they are. They don't run into big weather problems. Trump's out of office in 3-4 years. No one's forcing them to buy anything through tariffs or otherwise. I could see it.
But a lot of people are going, okay, we'll get a bunch of comments on this. They'll say, no, when Trump's out of office, all of a sudden China's going to be our friend. No.
They'll be our friend to the extent that they can buy what they need at a competitive price.
And as long as they can dump their manufactured goods here without...
it still comes down to economics more so than it does China's our adversary and they're tighter with Brazil. It's still going to come down to economics.
Mm-hmm. So what do you see when I painted my picture of the future? I see tariffs perpetually in perpetuity because countries are going to protect. Europe has been protectionist since we were kids. We didn't know it, but hell, they've propped up their automobile sector. They've been they've been anti-North American and even South American agriculture, unless it came down to, like you said, the people are going to starve. I see that being a trend that does not go away. I see more protection by especially established economies, Europe, North America, Australia.
Well, that's part of the reason Trump's doing what he's doing, right? Is because these other countries are very anti-United States and they've got big tariffs on our stuff and they want to just produce stuff and sell it to us, but not the other way around. And I don't know, that part of it will come down to probably who's in charge, what's leadership look like. Donald Trump's one president, but there's going to be somebody that comes after him. And what is their stance on the whole thing going to be? How does that work out? Because we kind of set the tone for a lot of this to some extent. So
we set the tone for a lot of this stuff. And I want to get into then also, Europe, grain markets and other stuff is the name of your show, but I want to get into stuff aside from just grain markets. Before I do that, I want to ask you, if you are a producer, are you in agreement that you're going to be required to use less nitrogen in the future? Yes, you will. Trust me. Environmental scrutiny is coming. I did a speech in western Nebraska, and it was all about how nitrates are in the water supply, and they are being scrutinized. If it's happening in western Nebraska, if it's happening in southern Wisconsin, it's going to happen where you are. Trust me. More scrutiny from a regulatory and environmental standpoint is coming to you. So how can you cut back on your nitrogen? You can use products like RDXN from my friends at Redox. RDXN is a patented, proven plant-active botanical extract that is designed to improve your nitrogen efficiency by 50%. You can cut back on nitrogen using RDXN. Fits the whole environmental thing and the regulatory environment you're going to face. While you boost your crop's quality and its consistency, if you want to learn more about this, go to redoxgrows.com. That's redoxgrows.com. All right, so... beef that got a bunch of people all going crazy. Argentina. I'm going to put a video out and explain that this is a really big deal because the United States is the #1 beef producer. It's also not really a big deal, because it's messing up the market for producers that are making a bunch of money here in the United States. Finally, it's not a big deal because if we let them bring 4 times as much beef in, it still is about 7% of all beef imports. It's not that big of a deal. Where do you stand on the whole beef thing? Is it a big deal or is it not a big deal from Argentina?
Argentina, my understanding, I'm not a beef expert by any means. My understanding is that there's probably not enough there to really move the needle in terms of prices, whether you're talking retail, wholesale, whatever. It's the stuff coming out of the White House and the stuff coming from Trump lately, like he has some vendetta against the rancher all of a sudden. And I was told a couple of different reasons potentially why, but in any case, it was bad press. It was a bad headline. But I think that with regard to imports, could they do a little bit from Argentina? Sure, they could. Could they open the border to Mexico with this whole screwworm thing eventually? Yeah, they probably will. But I don't know. I don't think that fixes the cattle markets story. It doesn't solve the problem. I don't think any of that does.
I think
that doesn't mean the market's not going to drop, $40 on it, because it does, and it will. These cattle markets, thinly traded futures markets relative to all else, easily moved. A couple fund traders get spooked. Boom, there's $20 gone. That's just kind of the way. That's where we're at right now. Yeah,
but a bigger point on global trade, this isn't going to make it so that hamburger goes down to 99 cents a pound at the grocery store from $4.99 or whatever it should be right now, because there's not even enough there to matter, right?
No. And the government, they think that they have some plans to rebuild the cattle herd. That's going to take years. Years.
Right. Also, the other part of that is, I think that this is not that trade hasn't always been this way. Trade is also... it's the political and also even the military aspect of it. If there's an actual plan in place, and I'm not sure that there is with this administration, I think the idea was this is a red line of Latin America is not going to be overtaken by China. We're going to go ahead and hop on the side of Argentina because China's got a finger all over Argentina with telecom and some other investments. It looks to me like this was trade as has been used in many cases throughout history to create a political outcome.
Yes, there was. So that whole thing with Argentina and the bailout and the soybean purchases that they sold beans to China at the same time we were bailing out. It was a really, really bad look for the White House and for the administration. I think it's water under the bridge now that it appears as if they've made a deal with China and China's going to buy some more, short term at least. But yeah, I think the U.S. I mean, I don't know what other way you say it. They bought political influence in Argentina, and they probably bought an election.
Who will be our probably? So if that's the case, who will be our trading partners? When we say the future of global trade, and I say China goes away for a lot of reasons because they want to not be a customer of ours and they're adversarial. The very Secretary of Agriculture, who is on your air coming up, was that already aired or is coming up?
She was on Monday morning.
That's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Who are our trade partners?
Your biggest trade partner, I mean, foreign trade partners, I don't know. Your biggest demand source is going to be domestic. I mean, that's how it already is for corn. I mean, corn's only
80%, isn't it 80%, Joe, of our corn production stays right here?
It's more than that. It's like 85, I think.
85%. Close
to that. Soybeans is where the issue is because 40% of the demand base is still exports or projected to be. And that's the one that you're going to have to figure out a solution for, because if Brazil keeps expanding, if China can, it's like every year, trade war, no trade war, every year China can get by with just slightly fewer U.S. soybeans than they did the year before. And that trend's accelerating. You're down to the point now where it's like they might only need a month or two's worth of their total year's usage from the United States. And it won't take long for them to get to a point where they really don't need much from us at all. So I don't know. I mean, who's going to need soybeans globally the way that China does?
Maybe
probably, they're not replaceable, I don't think.
Okay, maybe the other signal is we've grown 83 or 85 million acres worth of soybeans. Maybe we just need to cut back. Hell, we're growing 50% more soybeans now than we did 20 or 25 years ago. You know what? We don't need it.
It's a complicated conversation. Hey, do we need to diversify the stuff that we're growing? And the answer probably is yes, but it's a very difficult thing. It's much easier said than done because that most of these row crop operations in the United States and Midwest, I mean, they're set up on a corn soybean rotation. Right. Their whole infrastructure, their equipment, all of it's all based on that. And also, what other crop makes money? What are they going to grow that's going to shift their profitability?
Right. Yeah. So flax, because then the people that are into holistic baking can use more flax. Well, that's cool. That gobbles up, 100,000 acres. It takes a lot of specialty stuff like that to get to where we gobble up 85 or 83 million acres like is growing soybeans right now.
Yeah. I mean, all your, any alternative crop, they're all in the same boat. All these soft commodities that I'm looking at on my screen right now. I mean, none of them are, there's not anyone that I'm looking at that's like, oh, those guys are making money this year. They're all in tough shape.
Will there be, I have predicted that 20% of our acres in the next even 5 years could be idled in places like California. It's happening because of regulatory and of water. Eastern Colorado, I know I sound like I'm always picking on them, but I use them as an example. If you get 6 inches or 8 inches of annual precipitation, you should have goats or cattle out there. You should not be trying to grow corn or soybeans. You're already pumping water out of the Ogallala aquifer. I mean, it's sensitive, et cetera. I see a bunch of marginal acres that just through a government program or just through the economics of it get idled. But as long as the government's tossing money out here to grow these commodities, there's not a big motivation to do it. You take me ahead 5 years from now. What do you see?
Well, people have been, I mean, we hear it all the time. Joe, we need a set aside program. We need, something like that to get these prices back up. And it goes back to the idea that, hey, maybe the government doesn't want high commodity prices. Have you ever thought of that? Because again, 99% of the population are not farmers. Right. And they don't want high commodity prices in perpetuity. They want cheap food. And even though maybe they're not as hyper aware of it as they are in other countries, like how much we spend on food, because it's so minimal, as I mentioned. But I think that's the argument, in fact, that you're going to have to come back to is the United States really want to get into like hey, let's make food more expensive. Do they want that sort of policy? No, I don't think they do. Canada.
Tell me about Canada, because I got to tell you, a lot of folks don't don't quite see this. I have spoken in Canada a number of times. I've got friends that are in Canadian agriculture. I have lost 2 speaking engagements in the last 6 months that I was going to get because of the animosity toward America that the Canadians feel. And we don't quite perceive it down here. We think, oh, everything's fine. Yeah, Blue Jays play the Dodgers, whatever. There is a nationalism that was ignited up there by Trump calling them our 51st state that a lot of folks don't get. In Ontario, they're not letting the province runs liquor stores. So there's no American booze on the shelves in these places because we don't realize how badly they're fighting against us because it's like, oh yeah, whatever. We're so much bigger economically, population-wise. Does the thing with Canada get worked out? Do we go? They are our number one trading partner of all goods, not just, all right.
It makes too much sense to trade with Canada to not trade with Canada. It's just geographically, it sets up perfect. I had a very similar experience to you. I didn't understand the whole situation, and I made a comment, like just an offhanded, like stupid. I didn't mean a damn thing by a comment. Trump was calling Newsom Governor Newsom, and I said I think I used the phrase Governor Newsom, and I had a bunch of Canadian subscribers. I had them cancel subscriptions. I had them send me nasty stuff, and I get it now, but I didn't get it at the time. I didn't know that there was that animosity there, as you mentioned. I was totally unaware of it. I am aware of it now. But
Governor Newsom, you mean that the California thing? You mean he was calling Canada's
not Newsom, Trudeau. I'm sorry, Trudeau, not Newsom. Trudeau. He was calling him Governor Trudeau.
Governor Trudeau.
Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah, Governor. He was calling Trudeau the Prime Minister of Canada, the governor, meaning of like the state of Canada.
Yes, I'm sorry. And I don't know why I got those two guys confused. I maybe understand why you could get them confused. In any case,
they're both beta cuck lefty politicians.
You said it, not me.
I did.
But they're too damn close to us. It makes too much sense. It's like trading with Mexico. It makes too much sense.
So I agree completely that a lot of folks don't think this or even understand it when we always hear about China, because like I said, every hack ag economist in the last 20 years goes into a meeting and talks about China, and it's the same old thing. God knows, well, if every Chinese person eats another quarter-pounder cheeseburger per week, and then the hack ag economist took 1.4 billion times a quarter-pounder and then punched it out and said, that's as much beef as National Beef produces in Dodge City, Kansas, every blah, blah, blah. I always said China doesn't want to be our customer. I've said this for more than a decade. I was in front of audiences and they looked at me in awe that I was saying this. I'm like, you better concentrate on Canada and Mexico. And I said, Mexico is an ascending economy with 130 million people. I know that's only 10% as much as China, but Mexico, with 1/10 of the population of China, is a bigger agricultural customer of ours.
Gosh, they've been our best friend. I mean, they've been buying corn like nobody's business, and it sounds like they're going to keep buying corn.
And poultry. And
a whole bunch of stuff. Whole bunch of stuff. Yeah. And we've been not surprisingly, but we've been friendly with Mexico for the most part. Their president has not exhibited the urge to get on Trump's bad side the way that it sounds. So, yeah, we're happy to have him. We need him.
Does it end up working out? I know you and I both say it makes too much sense not to have Canada as a valuable trading partner, but they're dug in. I mean, they're dug in. I was saying this to my wife the other day. I said, when Quebec every 10 years gets mad, every 20 years, and wants to hold a referendum to secede from Canada. And the rest of Canada says, you stupid Quebecois people, you don't have a big enough economy, you're landlocked, you won't survive economically. And then they dig in even more on their nationalism or their French, patriotism in Quebec. And you want to tell the whole country of Canada, you are acting like Quebec right now. This is not smart for you. You're 1/12 of our economy, you're 1/9 of our population, 1/8 of our population. I think it'd be smarter rather than dig in to just make this work. And I'm not being critical. I'm giving you an outsider's perspective. Are you seeing it the same way?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, some of this stuff that goes on, I don't know if you'd call it geopolitics. It's some kind of politics. It doesn't make any damn sense. But people around the world are just like, everybody's all worked up as of late. I don't know if it's social media or cell phones or Instagram reels. I don't know what it is, but everybody's worked up about everything all the time. And there's a lot of things out there that just don't make any damn sense.
Right. Well, the problem is you and I both think about the money and how to make it sense. Specialty crop stuff. We are now, so we talked about global trade. We were a net exporter. Our revenue, we always sold way more. We had a positive trade surplus dollar-wise in terms of agricultural products. Low commodity prices hurts those numbers, and the fact that Americans love their coffee, their organic kumquats or whatever. Does this ever reverse? Speaking of trade, because right now we're in, I think, year 4, Mr. Vaclavik, of buying more agricultural stuff in a dollar amount than we sell. Does it ever revert?
I don't know that I've never thought of the markets in that way. Like the agricultural trade deficit is this. That's never really bothered me a ton because it's like you're comparing corn to like tropical fruits. Kumquats. They're different things. So we could very easily run into some sort of high price commodity environment where corn and soybeans rally and maybe we sell some more. Maybe it's a supply limitation, but you could have a really good farm economy and still have an ag trade deficit. It's never from a market standpoint, that's never bothered me. And I've never really concerned myself with it.
First off, I don't even know for sure what a kumquat is. I like to say it because they taught me in comedy back in 1994 that the "k" word is always good. It lends itself to comedy. Do you know what a kumquat is?
I don't.
So you've never had one, neither have I?
I'm pretty basic. I don't. Pretty basic.
All right. So if you were in the business of specialty crop, you might disagree with what you just said and said, oh, it's not a big deal if we have a trade deficit, because the trade deficit tends to be on horticulture, wine, coffee, kiwi, that kind of stuff.
There's some other stuff included in there too, like flowers and things along those lines that are included in those ag trade. We ran a story on this once, like a few weeks ago, and I remember kind of glossing over, like, this doesn't matter to me. But there were some things included in the import category, things that we import that I didn't even really think were even ag products, but they're the way that they're categorized are.
If you had a greenhouse in Omaha and you found out that flowers were coming in from somewhere in Latin America and undercutting you might be bothered by it. But first of all, it's not even on our radar. So
no, for the people you're talking to here, I mean, are we importing any material amount of corn, soybeans, or wheat? No. We import a little bit here and there. The East Coast poultry operations need some corn from Brazil, but it's pretty tiny.
All right. So look in your crystal ball. You're much more into this on global trade. I gave you my predictions. I said tariffs are here to stay. Protectionism sticks around. I don't think China is going to be a big customer or at all a customer in 5 years, but I don't think that's going to be who is going to be our customer. China, we want Canada, we want Mexico. Do you think things will get patched up with Canada just because it makes too much sense not to?
Yes. But other than that, I don't know. I mean, I think we're going to move to, I think the trend is going to be more domestic consumption.
Yeah.
More and more and more as a percentage of what we produce.
So once you get past sustainable aviation fuel, which right now economically doesn't make sense, what's your next?
You need it to be a policy-driven item.
And the customer that says this is going to make jet fuel more expensive, you think that's no big deal?
If they make it a policy thing and they make the tax incentives right, it can work.
Okay. And in rural America out here, there's going to still be some consolidation, and it's not necessarily trade oriented. There'll be a lot of blaming on tariffs when this happens, like there was with the grain embargo of 1980. Are we going to see rural out here where I'm living in the Corn Belt and whatnot? Are we going to see a lot of economic struggles for the next few years, and then it gets blamed back on trade? What are we going to see?
People blame everything on the tariffs, right? So you mentioned my YouTube comments, and we have a lot of what I call tourists in the comments who are not ag people who jump on and they comment. And the only thing that they're there to do, I don't even think half of them are real people. I think they're like robots, but it's just Donald Trump did this. Donald Trump did this. Donald Trump did this. And they always accuse me of like, Joe, you're defending Trump and his tariffs when you say that tariffs aren't the reason for the ag recession. They are the reason for the ag recession. No, they're not. They're just not.
Right.
They're not. Anybody who understands what's going on here knows that this ag economy problem, it predates this Trump administration.
Yep.
It has to do with, again, it's input inflation, it's big crops, and that's pretty much it. The tariffs were the icing on the cake, and China stopped buying for a little bit, but that's not what put us in this spot. And that's not me defending Trump. I'm just telling you what actually happened. And people don't like to hear that because they say, "Oh, Joe, get your red hat out. Get your red hat out, you Trump defender." I'm like, you don't get it. And I guess people haven't worked in the markets like I have for so long, but I don't know. I see the tariffs and the trade and the protectionism as being like, it's a little roadblock, but it all comes back to supply and demand and balance sheets. And that's what I try to explain to people.
It becomes almost you're almost embarrassed for some of the thing. I shot a video down in my field, and I pointed out, just like you're talking about, that tariffs are not the reason for the soft farm economy, and I went through all that. What's interesting is I hope it's robots, not just that many stupid people, but it became this thing of, oh, you're at the same deal. You put on your MAGA hat. I said, all I was telling you was the agricultural economics of it. And there's so few of us that have worked in this space that understand that. And what did I not ask you about when you think about the trade, globe, et cetera, that you want to cover?
We talked about a lot. One thing that I see like right now that's changing is interest rates are easing up a little bit, and the Fed is going in this more dovish direction. They're going to stop tightening, which means by default they're easing, and that's a complicated conversation. But it's not going to make anything better with regard to the inflation stuff if money starts to get a little bit cheaper. And the Federal Reserve of the United States has decided that the labor market has problems, even though maybe there's not a ton of data to back it up. But they've decided that the labor market, they're trying to look around three corners and say, we're seeing some stuff in the labor market, and that's why they're cutting rates. I think it could be good and bad. It could be inflationary to some degree, but if you get another inflation trade, like the big rally in row crops in 2022 was Russia, Ukraine, but it was also an inflation trade. It had a lot to do with big money buying every soft commodity on the planet because of inflation. You could get back into a more supportive environment here. I mean, these crops, Damian, I mean, corn at $4 and beans at 11 and wheat at 5. This stuff is dirt cheap.
Right.
Dirt cheap compared to everything else in the world. And even just compared to where they've been over the last, 10 years. We're like bottom of the barrel here for the most part. You could see a trade, like I talked about the debasement trade. You could see a similar type of trade, but that involves different things that maybe, hey, now the soft commodities caught a bid because money's got easy again. I could see something like that.
Yeah, I can too. The other last thought on this, it's been pointed out that if we do prop up the ag sector, that continues to keep commodities cheap, which makes it then better for our customers because they're buying cheap commodities. There is a point to be made there.
Yeah, because the natural cycle of a commodity market is that low prices, as we have now, should discourage production. And when the government steps in and interferes, they disrupt the natural cycle of the market, which is a long-term bearish factor. If they're not going to let production naturally be reduced through the means of basic economics, and they're going to continue to basically incentivize farmers to produce crops that don't make money, it disrupts the natural cycle of the entire market, and it messes things up for the worse. Big picture.
Yeah, and that's the tough part about, tariffs are a disruption to what an actual marketplace would do. Yeah. Government payments, subsidies, minimum wage, rent ceilings, rent floors, they're all disruptions to what.
The thing about tariffs that people don't understand is that tariffs don't add or subtract bushels from the balance sheet. A tariff doesn't make more bushels appear out of nowhere or subtract bushels from the world. It doesn't add or subtract bushels from the balance sheet. Now you start talking about low prices in a non-government intervention environment, that actually will result in bushels disappearing from the balance sheet, but they ain't going to let that happen.
Right. Because we want big crops because of the low commodity, because ultimately it trickles down to cheap food.
The reasoning is debatable because they don't come out and say that, but.
I've got a video that's going to be out before this episode releases because I already just shot it in my hayloft about the USDA's policy. And I pointed out that if you think that it is about farmers are the supply chain, they are not the reason, because the United States Department of Agriculture's policy, unstated as it may be since 1865 when the organization was made, has been cheap, abundant, and safe food for the masses.
Well, what's the majority of USDA's budget? It's SNAP, it's food stamps, it's not farm programs.
Yep, 80% of the USDA budget goes for nutrition programs to feed the 42 million people who are on it. All right, his name is Joe Vaclavik. I read once in a business book, Joe, a long time ago, that said, if you want to get a promotion at IBM, you wear a navy suit and a certain color tie. That way, because that's what the people that are the leaders dress like. You dress like the leaders. I think you're a leader in agriculture. So you might notice I wore a hooded sweatshirt and a hat because every time I tune into grain markets and other stuff, you are up at 4 a.m. and you're doing these recordings and you're wearing a hooded sweatshirt and a hat. Did I do a good job?
You did a good job, but there is no rhyme or reason to this. This is just like, I just don't care. And I want to put out good content. And if I look like shit in the morning because I didn't sleep good or because my kids were sick or because I'm sick, I mean, that's just the way it is. And I decided that that's something, getting dressed up every morning for work is not something I have time for. Put it that way.
The man gets up at 3:45 a.m. Central to produce grain markets and other stuff. If you like what you hear here on my show, do go check out his stuff. It's good. It's snappy. It's quick. He's got always good people on there. And again, he's not afraid to just give you the straight data. It's not political. It's just, here's this thing. Here's why it's happening. Here's how it affects you.
People think it's political, but it's not. So in this environment, you have to talk about policy, which means that I have to talk about Donald Trump, whether you love him, hate him, whatever. Like, he has to be mentioned because he's moving the markets. If he wasn't moving the markets, I don't give a shit. It's not my lane, but that's what's moving the markets right now.
Yeah. And that's the same thing with this show. I've had the same thing. I've had tourists, as you call them, that come on and they want to fight. I'm like, you want to fight with me? I'm just telling you, here's the reality based on the agricultural, economic, marketplace stuff that's going on, and that's the way it is. Anyway, go check out his stuff. What do they need to know? Just go on YouTube and type in grain markets.
YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Just type in grain markets. We're the first thing that pops up on any of those apps.
He does an amazing job at it, and whether he wants to admit it or not, I call him the pride of the Illini. The 7 years he spent in Champaign, he'll never forget. Anyway, it was really only 4 years, but anyway,
it was 4. I did get done in 4. I didn't get done well, but I got done.
Well, there's motivation for poor kids like you and I. You can't stick around on the.
I wanted to go work. Honestly, I didn't care about school. I wanted to go work. I didn't care about school. I never liked school. I wanted to work.
Similar situation. I mean, I was an okay student, but the kids that loved being students. I loved the idea of making money. I mean, hell, I worked at a bar for 42 hours a week my last semester at Purdue because I was broke. And I'm like, I would rather make money than go in there and take those classes.
Yeah, I was kind of the same way. The school never excited me. I thought I was just sitting there waiting to go work. That's what it felt like to me.
Anyway, his name's Joe Vaclavik. The show is called Grain Market and Other Stuff. This show is called The Business of Agriculture. If you enjoy it, please share it with somebody. I'm getting tremendous views now on YouTube. I didn't even concentrate on YouTube until starting in January. So share it there. Listen to it where you get your audio. All the platforms were there. Also, remember, if you like what I do, check out my show, The Granary, that I'm doing with XtremeAg. It's shot right here on my on-farm tavern where I get together with ag people and talk about big picture stuff. It's a little bit more of a laid-back environment. You can pull up a chair, pour yourself a drink, and join that conversation also. So till next time, he's Joe, I'm Damian, and this is The Business of Agriculture. This episode of The Business of Agriculture was brought to you by my friends at New Fields Ag. American-made, American-known, focusing on the success of the American farmer. That's New Fields Ag, offering a complete lineup of high-performing biological products for you, the American farmer. Visit newfieldsag.com for more.